Hello you guys, and welcome to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and today I want to share the 10 lies we tell ourselves about our clutter. As a general disclaimer, I think with any of these, while it is maybe a lie for a lot of us, there are probably exceptions to every single one of these. So maybe you are in the situation where it is an exception and not an issue, but I think for some of us, these 10 lies or even excuses might be reasons why we hold on to extra clutter that we really don't need in our lives or that don't bring us the joy that I feel like they should. So without further ado, let me get into these 10 lies we tell ourselves about our clutter. First up, I'm not using this item now, but in the future I definitely will. I know I told this lie to myself about a variety of things. I was saving them for in the future when I would definitely need it. But you know what? In many of these cases, we think that the item will be more useful to us in the future than it actually is. Maybe it even goes along with a more idealized version of ourselves where we think we are going to be more active than we are right now, or we will change our living habits a lot compared to how we are right now. And the truth is that it can be very tough to do that. So if you've got things hanging around your house that you think are only for the future version of you, then it might be time to let those items go, or at least kind of come to terms with why there's a disconnect between current you and future you. Lie number 2, this will be worth something. Here's also the tough truth. So many collectible type products are not actually worth as much as we think. Now, there definitely are products that you can sell and still get good money's worth for. If you've been following the channel for a while, when I was a kid, not proud of it, but my sister and I did have a phase where we were playing with these Bratz dolls that were hideous dolls and just don't look very nice. We actually managed to sell pretty much all of them, and I made about $500 selling those, which was really awesome. That's not necessarily, an exact collectible. A lot of the things we have we think will be worth more than what they are, but there's 2 important things to keep in mind. First of all, will someone actually want to buy what you're offering? The tough truth is that even if something is worth a lot of money, if there's not actually a buyer for that item, like you could list something on eBay for $1,000. Maybe it is worth like a lot of money. But if no one's gonna buy that from you, then it's not actually really worth that much money. And second of all, are you willing to go through the process of actually selling it at whatever point that is? Jake and I have sold a lot of our stuff, but there are definitely certain things that it's just not worth selling. If it doesn't meet a minimum price threshold, then you're going to lose a large percentage of items if you're selling them on eBay or Amazon. And you have to factor in shipping costs and just the process and the time and the cost of shipping materials. You have to decide if it's worth it. And sometimes it's not, especially if the item is not really worth as much as you think it might be. There are definitely a lot of older items where there are very few of them, but there's also a lot of products that are marked as like collector's editions that a lot of people have been collecting and let sitting around their house. And so is it gonna actually be worth as much? That's tough to tell. The third lie we tell ourselves is that I need to keep this item so that I can remember this experience. And while I think it's definitely true that many of our items do connect us to a certain memory, maybe of when we've got the item or when we use the item, I don't think we need to solely depend on these items. If there are no reasons you're keeping a certain object besides the fact that you're using it as a memory tool, there could be other options. I do find for me that if there is something I want to get rid of that I don't feel like I need the physical item, I take a picture of it. And for me, that's a way that I feel like I can preserve it digitally without it taking up any physical space in my own apartment. Likewise, it might seem kind of silly, but I sort of see my anti-haul videos as a chance to sort of give all of my things I'm getting rid of their final spotlight. I'm talking about them for a few moments and showing them on camera. It's public, it's there, and it's kind of a way for me to sort of, I guess, say goodbye to those items that I don't choose to keep using for whatever reason. And so in that way, it sort of even preserves the item, and I'm even talking about it. So me being there explaining it gives me a chance. And then also, I think there's something to be said about, the numbers of items you're saving. Yes, maybe this particular item brings you back to the time you went on vacation here. But do you have other items that also bring you back to that same vacation? Maybe instead of having multiple items about that same sort of event, maybe you could simplify it and just have one or two key pieces. Sometimes I find that having fewer objects from a certain time period or person means that we can actually enjoy each object more because our attention is divided less among all these different objects and instead focusing on just a couple. So that could be something helpful to think about. The fourth lie we tell ourselves about our clutter is that I can't declutter right now because I'm really busy or it's just not the right time. Saying that we just can't declutter anything at all in a given time can be really limiting for ourselves. What we need to remember is that yes, it is time consuming if you're trying to declutter massive amounts of stuff or completely transform your space, but you can declutter and build decluttering related habits into your daily life and even start with one thing per day. As you use an item, think about it a little bit and decide if it's something you still want to keep. We don't have to treat decluttering as, this active phase where you can't do anything else but declutter. Of course, when you're starting out, it may be helpful to do that. Don't psych yourself out and assume you can't start just because you can't get rid of everything. Something is better than nothing. The fifth lie we tell ourselves about our clutter is that everyone has to have one of these things. Whatever the item in question is, if we assume that it's just, part of life that everyone must have one, we may be missing the mark, or that may not be true. Now, certain items, I'm sure, yes, maybe every household does have certain things, but the great news is that we have an immense variety of different goods available to us. Many of us live very different lifestyles with one another, and I don't think we have to make the assumption that we need to hold on to a certain item just because everyone else has one. And here's a further takeaway. Let's say everyone else does have one and you decide you don't need it. In that case, then I think you know who you can go to if you need to borrow one. Everyone else. So definitely keeping that in mind about maybe you don't actually need it. Just because others have one doesn't mean that you have the same needs as them. A lot of people in our apartment complex here probably have certain products that Jake and I don't have and don't really have a use for. That's okay. Vice versa. We might have things that they don't have, but don't have a use for. It just really comes back to personalized to what you need and what you value. The next lie we tell ourselves about our clutter is that future generations are going to want this item. I do think this connects back to that disclaimer. There are definitely important family heirlooms that I'm not saying be heartless about and declutter automatically, but there may be chances of things that we put a little bit too much significance on and aren't actually going to really be desired by family members. Just like I mentioned before, maybe there are certain key pieces that people from the family want. But when we're talking about, let's say after someone's passing, a whole lifetime worth of stuff, the sad truth is that most of that's going to end up in the dumpster. And every single thing you owned is not going to be something that people wanted in future generations. So I think it's important to keep in mind, what are the most strategic pieces that are needed? What are the things that are most desired by future generations? So kids, grandkids, etc. Know that, maybe keep that in mind. Discuss that at some point with family. I think if you have that conversation with others in your family, you'll be able to find out what the items are that people want and what items are that they don't really have any significance to. It doesn't mean they're not good items, and it doesn't mean that they didn't serve you well, but just holding on to things because you assume that people in the family or future generations are going to want them may be a way you hold on to more clutter than you need to. The next lie we tell ourselves about our clutter is that when some sort of thing happens, I'll need to have it. So this obviously varies a lot. Maybe it means, when I get married, I'll need to have one of these. Or when I go to this country, or when I travel here, I'm going to need one of these. Whatever the event is, thinking that you'll need it at that point. Two issues with this. First of all, this is very hypothetical. Even though you might think and feel strongly that this event will happen, It may not happen for a long time, so therefore you could be holding on to this stuff for a long time. But second, when you do actually get to that moment, you may realize that it actually wasn't what you needed, or it didn't really make as much sense as you thought it did, or times have changed and it's kind of obsolete. So I think that's important to think about. You may be holding on to certain things for that time, and then only to realize when you get to the time you've been saving them for years for no real purpose. So I think we want to make sure that we're being careful with this. This one can also kind of be connected. The minimalists have something they call the 20-20 rule. If they can replace something within 20 minutes or within $20, then maybe they don't need to keep it, because if they absolutely needed to have it, they could get it fairly easily. So maybe this even applies here. Chances are you won't actually need it, but if you did, if it's not as difficult or expensive to replace, then maybe that's a valid option. The 8th lie we tell ourselves about our clutter is that if we get rid of it, we will regret it. Again, this can vary on the person, but at least in my own experience of getting rid of literally hundreds of items, I actually don't regret any of it. I genuinely don't. To be honest, especially compared to when I had so much at the beginning, I honestly just forget about a lot of the stuff that I had. It's funny, there has been times I've gone back and rewatched some of my old anti-haul videos, and it's like, oh yeah, I had that thing. But literally it hadn't crossed my mind at all since I got rid of it. And there hasn't been one item I can think of where I was like, you know, I really wish I wouldn't have gotten rid of that. Now, that's not to say that, you know, it's impossible that you won't, but I think if you declutter in a way that's very comfortable to you, you think about what you value, you stay very practical about it, or thinking about items that bring you joy, you're not going to declutter those items that bring you the most joy. You're going to hold on to those things. So when you're operating more so from that perspective, I think it really helps. Lie number 9 that we tell ourselves is, I would get rid of it, but no one wants it, or I don't know what to do with it. Now, it can definitely feel a little overwhelming when you're trying to get rid of items and you don't know where they can go. But I think you can probably do a little bit of research in your area to figure out if there's different donation centers you can take things to. If there are items that are actually still in packaging and still sold in stores, you can try returning things without receipts. You know, not an ideal situation, but Jake and I have probably over the years returned about 10 items that we never purchased ourselves, or that we had purchased even years before. And you only can do one thing at a time and like per driver's license, but we've definitely returned things that we never bought or we hadn't purchased in years, and to get money back. So that's always nice when that can happen. There's a lot of great options online to sell things there, whether it's Amazon and eBay, or even some of the different clothing places such as ThreadUp or Poshmark. And then also maybe you go the more traditional route of having a garage sale for items. There's a big range. Of course, some things may just have to be thrown away or recycled. But if you do a little bit of research and kind of reflecting on what you're getting rid of, I think you'll find there are options. Even if, yes, sometimes they are a little bit more involved. I feel like probably the easiest thing is to just send stuff off to a local donation center and they can process things from there. The main idea is to don't let it hold you back just because you might not be sure of what to do with a certain item. It also does get easier as we go. Jake and I usually have a pretty good sense. Is this going to be worth money? We'll maybe do a quick search on Amazon and eBay, look at things that have recently sold or sales rankings to know if it's worthwhile and what the base cost is, and then decide from there. And lastly, the 10th lie that we tell ourselves about our clutter is that I don't have to start today. I can start tomorrow. I can start whenever. And I guess to some degree, technically, yes, you don't have to start today. But that frame of thinking can be problematic because it only pushes off what could be benefiting us today for the future. It doesn't have to mean, you know, that we put everything else aside and only declutter, and it has to be a really intensive process. Even if you start with one item, literally starting with one item is all that it takes. Deciding, hey, you know what? This particular item is no longer giving me joy. You might even be able to think just quickly as you're watching this video, maybe you can already identify those couple items that you don't really enjoy. Maybe you could even glance around your space and see, you know what, this section of the home has not made me feel as calm as I'd like it to be. There's a lot right here. There's a lot going on. Or this drawer, when I open it, it's frustrating to me because there's so much in it and I can never find what I'm looking for. You may know some of those places in your home. You don't have to put it off anymore. You can literally take 1 minute today, identify something that is no longer helping you or serving you, giving the value that items should have, and you can remove that item from your life. That's an option, and you don't have to wait anymore. So even though it's very easy to think, I'll deal with that in the future or someday, that day might not come, and you're also pushing off the benefits of living more simply until that point. You can start reaping the benefits very, very early on. So I'm hopeful that you feel motivated, if you haven't yet started decluttering, to maybe jump into that right now, immediately after this video. Heck, you can leave right now if you want. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm hopeful that these 10 maybe lies or excuses we tell ourselves to hold on to extra clutter were helpful for you, or maybe even eye-opening if there was one that maybe you've been saying before. I was definitely guilty of saying some of these before I finally got things together and more organized and simplified, and I have not looked back since I began that journey. If you guys enjoy minimalist related content, I do post 2 videos per week on Wednesdays and Saturdays at noon. So you can feel free to subscribe to the channel right here or check out any of our past videos over here. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Bye.